In a world where strength and skill define champions, one warrior swore his strike could never be avoided. But when the human he sought to defeat disappears, a chilling mystery unfolds. What happens when the champion's unbeatable blow lands on someone, or something that no longer exists? Get ready for a story of power, revenge, and the unexpected twist of fate. This is not just a battle for victory, it's a battle for the future. The legendary champion had always been unbeatable, his prowess unmatched by any warrior in the galaxy. Known for his lightning-fast strikes and unyielding power, he was a force to be reckoned with, respected and feared by all. His reputation was built on the belief that no one, no matter how skilled, could dodge his legendary blow. With every battle, he left a trail of defeated opponents, their bodies crumpled under the weight of his power. To the galaxy, he was invincible. Born on a planet where combat was a way of life, the champion had trained from a young age. His strength grew with each passing year, and his mind sharpened with the discipline of relentless training. But there was more to his power than just physical strength. It was his precision, his ability to read the movements of his enemies that made him truly deadly. With a single strike, he could cripple even the most skilled opponent, and no one had ever managed to avoid it. The people who faced him knew they were up against something more than just a warrior. They were up against an unstoppable force of nature. The champion was the embodiment of the perfect fighter. He had no weaknesses, no hesitations, and no mercy. His opponents didn't stand a chance. But as time passed, the galaxy began to whisper of one human, a mere mortal who was rumored to have done the impossible. The story said that this human had dodged the champion's strike, slipping out of harm's way at the last moment, leaving the champion stunned and confused. To the champion, this was an affront to everything he believed. It was unthinkable. For a moment, he thought it was nothing more than a fluke, but the rumors grew, and so did the doubt in his mind. The challenge was clear. He needed to find this human and prove to the galaxy that no one could ever escape his wrath. He vowed that no matter what it took, he would hunt down this elusive human and show the universe that even a mere mortal could never escape his strike. What he didn't know was that this hunt would lead him into a much darker mystery than he ever anticipated. As the champion prepared for the final confrontation, little did he know that the human wasn't there anymore, and this battle would take him to a place he could never have imagined. The search for the elusive human took the champion across the galaxy. He visited countless planets, tracking every lead, questioning witnesses, and chasing whispers in the wind. But every time he came close, the trail would vanish, like smoke slipping through his fingers. No one could explain it. Every person he spoke to described the same thing. The human had disappeared without a trace. There were no signs of struggle, no clues left behind. It was as if the human had simply vanished from existence. The champion, frustrated and increasingly obsessed, began to question everything he thought he knew. How could someone so ordinary, so insignificant by galactic standards, evade him so effortlessly? He had faced warriors, creatures, and machines that were far beyond human capability, yet none of them had ever avoided his strike. This one human, however, had done what no one else could. But it wasn't just the disappearance that haunted him. There was a sense of unease growing within him, feeling he couldn't shake. It gnawed at the edges of his mind, growing louder with each passing day. Something wasn't right. The human's disappearance wasn't just a mystery. It was a message. A message he couldn't understand. His travels took him to a desolate planet, long abandoned by civilization. It was a place where the sun never quite seemed to shine, and the wind carried a cold, eerie silence. There, the champion met a mysterious figure cloaked in tattered robes, their face hidden in the shadows. This figure spoke in riddles, but their words cut through the champion's thoughts like a blade. "The human you seek is no longer of this world," the figure said, their voice echoing in the stillness. "What you seek is not what you think?" The champion's anger flared. "Tell me where the human is. I won't stop until I find them." The cloaked figure didn't flinch. "You are looking for a person who has transcended the realm of the living. They are no longer bound by the same rules. You seek a shadow. But shadows do not stay." The words made little sense, but there was a strange truth to them. The champion's grip tightened around his weapon. "I don't care about your riddles. I will find them. and I will make them regret ever dodging my strike." The figure sighed, as though resigned to something the champion could not yet comprehend. "The human is gone, but what remains may be something far worse than you can imagine. Proceed with caution, champion. There are forces at play here that you cannot defeat with mere strength." The champion's mind raced. What was this figure talking about? What did they mean by forces? But before he could ask another question, the figure was gone, as if swallowed by the very air itself. The champion was left standing alone, the weight of their words settling heavily in his chest. The mystery deepened. The hunt had only just begun. The champion stood there, alone on the barren planet, the figure's cryptic words echoing in his mind. Had heard whispers of powerful forces beyond mortal comprehension, beings and energies that were capable of altering reality itself. But he had always dismissed these tales as nothing more than superstition, the ramblings of the weak and frightened. Now, however, those same tales seemed to be creeping into his own reality. Could there really be something more at play than just a simple human evading his strike? His resolve hardened. No matter what mysterious force was behind this, he would find a way to defeat it. He had always relied on his strength, his ability to overcome any obstacle, and he was not about to let some unknown entity stand in his way. With renewed determination, he boarded his ship, ready to continue the hunt. He made his way to the last known location of the human, a small, insignificant planet on the edge of the galaxy. It was a place no one paid much attention to, and it was said that only the most desperate or foolish ventured there. The atmosphere was thick with dust, the sky a constant dull gray. As he landed on the planet, a strange sensation washed over him, something he couldn't quite explain. The air felt heavy, like the weight of history itself hung over the land. The champion stepped off his ship and onto the planet's surface, his boots sinking slightly into the soft, sandy ground. He felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as he prepared for whatever awaited him. But this time, there was an unfamiliar tension in the air. His senses were heightened, as though he were being watched. Every shadow seemed to move, and every breeze carried an unsettling whisper. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the very planet was alive with a presence he could not see. He walked toward the ruins of a once thriving civilization, its buildings now crumbling and overgrown with vines. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the ruins. It was here, in the heart of this forgotten place, that he believed he would find the answers he sought. As he navigated through the ruins, he came across an ancient structure, its walls adorned with strange symbols and carvings. The champion had seen many such symbols before, but none like these. They seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, their meanings lost to time. He stepped closer, his curiosity piqued, and placed his hand on one of the carvings. The moment his fingers made contact, the ground trembled beneath him. The air around him seemed to crackle with energy, and for a brief moment, he felt a surge of power unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was as though the planet itself was alive, responding to his touch. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind, clear and unmistakable. "Welcome, champion," the voice said, its tone both soothing and unnerving. "You've come seeking answers, but what you find here will change you forever." The champion stepped back, his heart racing. Who was this voice? What was happening to him? He had never felt anything like this before. The symbols on the walls began to glow, and the ground beneath his feet split open, revealing a hidden chamber below. Without thinking, the champion descended into the darkness, drawn by an inexplicable force. As he moved deeper into the chamber, he could feel the air growing colder, and the sensation of being watched intensified. But it was too late to turn back now. He had come this far, and he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. What he didn't know was that the answers he sought would lead him to a revelation far more terrifying than he could ever imagine. The human he sought was not simply Gunhi, had become part of something far more powerful, something that could not be defeated by physical strength alone. As the champion descended further into the chamber, the air grew thick with an energy that made his skin crawl. Every step he took seemed to echo, amplifying the sense of isolation that hung in the air. The deeper he went, the more he felt like an intruder, like someone trespassing in a place where they did not belong. The walls of the chamber were covered in ancient carvings, but these weren't just decorative, they were warnings. Warnings that no one had dared to heed. His mind raced. What had he walked into? What was he about to uncover? The chamber opened into a vast, circular room, center dominated by an enormous stone altar, its surface smooth and untouched by time. Surrounding the altar were more of the strange symbols he had seen earlier, but they now seemed to hum with a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. The air was thick with a palpable sense of power, and the champion could feel it seeping into his very bones. In the center of the altar, there was a crystal, glowing with an eerie light. The champion, driven by a mix of curiosity and determination, stepped closer, his hand reaching out instinctively. The moment his fingers brushed against the crystal, a surge of energy coursed through him, and he staggered back, barely keeping his balance. He could feel something inside the crystal presence. It was ancient, powerful, and unmistakably aware of him. For the first time in his life, the champion felt fear. Not the fear of a strong opponent or a looming battle, but a deeper, primal fear that gripped his soul. "You have touched the heart of the truth, champion." The voice from earlier echoed in his mind once more, now louder, clearer. "The human you seek is no longer immortal. They have become part of something. It's much greater." The champion's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? Where is the human? What have you done to them?" The voice responded, its tone dark and foreboding. "The human has transcended the boundaries of flesh. They are part of the energy that flows through this galaxy, part of a force that cannot be stopped, cannot be killed, cannot be dodged." The champion felt his grip on reality beginning to slip. What he was hearing, what he was experiencing, was beyond anything he had ever been prepared for. He had always believed in his strength, his unshakable belief in his ability to defeat anything. But now he was being confronted with something far beyond his understanding. "Your strike, champion, is nothing more than a momentary flash in the vastness of time," the voice continued, growing more intense. "You have hunted the human, but you have failed to see the greater truth. You cannot strike what is no longer bound by the rules of the physical world." The champion's heart raced as the realization sank in. The human hadn't just dodged his strike, they had become something else, something that transcended death, something that existed in a different realm. The champion had been chasing a shadow, and now that shadow was a part of something much greater than he could ever fathom. The crystal before him pulsed with a strange energy, as though it were alive, and in that moment, the champion understood. The human wasn't gone, they had become a part of something that could never be undone, a part of the universe itself. That meant his fight, his hunt, had been in vain from the start. But it was too late to turn back now. Champion could feel the pull of the crystal, the call of something ancient and powerful. He had come too far to simply walk away, didn't know what was coming next. But he knew one thing for sure, this wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. This was a battle for the very fabric of existence. The champion's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. He had spent his entire life perfecting his craft, training his body, and believing that no one could withstand his power. Yet here he was, facing a truth he could barely comprehend. The human he had sought to defeat was no longer a mere mortal. They had become something far greater, an entity woven into the fabric of the universe itself. He stumbled back from the crystal, his mind racing. What did this mean for him? What was his purpose now? Had he been chasing an illusion all along? The champion had always believed that strength was the key to everything. That if he could defeat any opponent, he would be the ultimate being. But now, standing before this ancient power, felt insignificant an insect, trapped in a web far too vast for him to escape. The chamber began to hum with energy, as though the walls themselves were alive, vibrating with the pulse of the crystal. The air grew colder, and the champion could see his breath forming in front of him. His instincts screamed at him to leave, to flee from this place of unimaginable power. But there was something deeper at play, a force greater than fear, curiosity, his desire to understand, to learn what had become of the human and why he had been drawn here in the first place. "You're too late, champion," the voice whispered, its tone both mournful and resigned. "You were never meant to understand. You were never meant to win." The words stung like a slap, but the champion refused to be deterred. "I'm not leaving until I find out everything. I've come too far. Tell me what happened to the human. What have they become?" The crystal before him pulsed again, the light intensifying until it was blinding. And then, as if the very fabric of time itself was shifting, a vision unfolded before his eyes. He saw the human, the one he had sought to defeat, standing in the center of a vast, swirling void. They were no longer human in the traditional sense. They were a being of pure energy, their form shifting and swirling like a storm of light. They no longer had a body as he understood it, but their consciousness had expanded beyond the constraints of flesh. The human turned toward him, their eyes glowing with a strange, otherworldly light. In their gaze, the champion saw not anger or fear, but something far more unsettling: peace. They had transcended the need for power, for revenge, for violence. They had become one with the universe, a force of balance and harmony. And in that moment, the champion understood the true meaning of defeat. The human had not merely avoided his strike, they had outgrown the very concept of battle itself. You still don't understand, do you? The human's voice echoed in his mind, though their lips did not move. I was never meant to be your opponent. I was meant to show you the truth. Your strength is a fleeting thing, champion. In the grand scheme of the universe, it means nothing. What matters is understanding. What matters is balance. The champion's knees buckled, and he fell to the ground, overwhelmed by the realization. He had been so focused on proving his superiority, so obsessed with the idea of defeating someone, that he had never seen the bigger picture. The human had shown him a truth he had refused to see, a truth that made his entire existence seem small and insignificant. But even in the face of this overwhelming revelation, the champion refused to surrender. He clenched his fists, feeling the familiar surge of power coursing through him. He had spent his life conquering every obstacle, and he wasn't about to let this one moment of clarity change that. He would fight, even if the battle was no longer one of flesh and blood. As the champion rose to his feet, the energy in the chamber began to shift, and the crystal before him flickered. The human's form began to dissolve into the swirling void, leaving behind nothing but a faint glow. You cannot win this fight, the voice whispered once more, but this time, the champion heard something else in Etregret. The champion stood alone in the chamber, the haunting glow of the crystal still flickering in his vision. The human, no. The being had vanished, leaving him to grapple with the weight of what he had just witnessed. For the first time in his life, he felt a deep emptiness, a void where his unshakable confidence used to reside. His whole life had been built around the idea of strength, dominance, and the ability to crush anyone who stood in his way. But now, standing here in this forsaken ruin, he realized that strength alone had no place in the grand scheme of things. He looked down at his hands, fists clenched, and for the first time, he wondered if all the bloodshed, all the countless victories, had been in vain. What had he really accomplished? He had crushed his enemies, torn down kingdoms, and built a reputation that would echo through the annals of history. But none of that had brought him peace. None of that had given him the understanding he sought now. The voice of the human, or whatever they had become, still echoed in his mind. Your strength is fleeting. In the grand scheme of the universe, it means nothing. The words stung, yet there was a painful truth to them. He had always believed that defeating his opponents would give him the power he craved. But what had it truly brought him? Glory? Yes. Respect? Perhaps. But peace. Understanding. The room around him seemed to close in, the walls pulsing with a rhythm that matched the beat of his heart. The ancient symbols on the walls glowed brighter, as though they were alive, guiding him toward something. What was this force? What was this power that had transcended everything he knew about combat, about life itself? The champion's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp crack in the air. The ground trembled beneath him, and a flash of light erupted from the center of the altar. He instinctively raised his hands, prepared for another attack, but there was no threat. Instead, a figure emerged from the light, a being made of energy and light, its form shifting in the air like smoke. This was not the human. It was something far older, far more powerful. The champion's heart raced as the figure spoke, its voice a harmonious blend of many voices, as if speaking from the very stars themselves. You have been searching for answers, champion, the figure said, its tone both calming and overwhelming. But the answers you seek are not the ones you expect. Strength is not the way forward. You must learn to transcend, to let go of the pride and power that have defined you. Only then will you understand the true nature of the universe. The champion took a step back, his mind reeling. He had faced countless enemies, but this was no enemy. This was something beyond even the champion's understanding, something that seemed to embody the very essence of the universe itself. "Who are you?" Champion demanded, his voice a mixture of defiance and fear. "What do you want from me?" The figure's form shimmered, and it spoke again. "I am a force that has existed since the beginning of time. I am the balance that holds the universe together. I am what you have been seeking, but you were never ready to understand until now. You have faced physical challenges, but the real challenge is to face the unknown, to accept that there are forces far greater than any one being." The champion felt the weight of the figure's words settling in. He had spent so long striving for power, for the belief that his strength could overcome anything. But here, in the presence of this entity, he felt small. In the grand scale of existence, he was nothing more than a fleeting moment. He was just one warrior in a galaxy full of others, each struggling for their own piece of the universe. And yet the champion wasn't ready to give up. He had fought for everything he had, and he wasn't about to stop now. But this fight was no longer one of physical might. It was a battle of understanding, of learning to let go of everything he had known. "You seek to challenge the laws of nature, champion," the figure continued. "But the universe does not bend to the will of any single being. What you must do now is accept the truth. Power is not the answer. It is understanding, balance, and harmony that hold the key to what you seek." The champion clenched his fists, his eyes narrowing. "I won't stop. I will find a way to prove myself. I don't care about balance or harmony. I care about victory." The figure's voice softened. "And that is your true challenge, champion. To prove to yourself that victory does not lie in dominance over others. It lies in overcoming your own limitations, in understanding that there is more to life than strength. Only then will you truly be free." The words struck the champion like a blow, more powerful than anything he had ever faced. He had always believed that the greatest victory was defeating his enemies, but what if true victory lay in defeating himself? The champion stood in stunned silence, the weight of the figure's words pressing down on him like an invisible force. For the first time, he was unsure of himself. He had spent his entire existence carving out a path of domination, fighting, winning, and basking in the glory of his victories. But now, in this chamber filled with ancient energy, everything he had believed in seemed to be unraveling. Was all of it truly meaningless? Was there more to life than the endless pursuit of power? The figure before him, a being of pure energy, pulsed with an aura of calmness, as though it could see into the deepest parts of his soul. "You are at a crossroads, champion," it said, its voice as soft as a breeze, yet resonating with a deep cosmic authority. "The journey you've taken has brought you here, but it is not the destination you once thought it was. What you seek is not a victory over others, but a victory over your own pride and limitations." The champion's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." "What do you mean?" "I've trained my whole life to be the strongest, to be unbeatable." "How's that wrong?" The figure's form shifted slightly, the energy around it swirling. "Strength is not wrong. But the pursuit of strength for its own sake, to dominate and control, without understanding the balance of all things, is power without wisdom is a dangerous thing. And when you seek to crush others, you only blind yourself to the true purpose of existence." The champion felt a strange stirring inside him, conflict between the man he had been and the person he was being told to become. It was as if he had been living in a fog, chasing after something he thought he wanted, only to realize it had always been out of reach. All his battles, his triumphs, his unyielding drive to prove his supremacy, they seemed so empty now. "You speak of balance, of wisdom," the champion said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "But how am I supposed to find that? I've only known the fight, the struggle. How do I embrace something I don't understand?" The figure's energy rippled like water disturbed by a stone. "By letting go. Let go of your obsession with victory. Let go of the belief that you must always be the strongest. Look within yourself, and you will find that true strength comes not from power, but from acceptance, understanding, and humility. You have fought countless battles to become what you are, but you have yet to fight the greatest battle, the battle within your own heart." The champion's hands trembled at his sides. The voice of the figure seemed to reverberate in his chest, like a slow drumbeat that matched his own heart. He had never fought a battle like this before. All his battles had been physical, visible. But this battle, this was one he would have to fight with his mind, his spirit, his very soul. "How do I start?" he asked, the words feeling foreign to him. "How do I change everything I've known?" The figure smiled, a gesture that felt like the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness. "The first step is to listen. Listen to the universe, to the beings around you, and most importantly, to yourself. The journey ahead will not be easy. You will struggle, you will doubt, and you will face challenges that no weapon can overcome. But it is through those challenges that you will learn the truth. Only then will you be free." The champion stood silently for a moment, the magnitude of the journey ahead sinking in. It was a path he had never considered before, one that would require him to abandon the very things that had defined him. But in the stillness of the chamber, he felt a glimmer of something new, something he had never experienced before: hope. For the first time in his life, the champion realized that true freedom didn't come from defeating others. It came from conquering the limits within himself. It was a terrifying thought, but it was also liberating. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new kind of strength, one that didn't rely on brute force, but on wisdom and understanding. As the figure began to fade, its final words resonated in the champion's mind. "The journey you seek is not one of victory, but of transformation. Only then will you see what it means to truly be a champion." The champion stood alone in the chamber as the figure's presence slowly faded, leaving him surrounded by the deep silence of the forgotten ruins. The light from the crystal dimmed, and the glow of the strange symbols on the walls flickered, as if responding to the shift in the energy around him. The chamber, once filled with an ominous and overwhelming power, now seemed like a mere shell, a place that had held secrets too vast for any one being to understand. He took a deep breath, the air heavy with the weight of his thoughts. For the first time, he truly felt the enormity of the change he had been asked to undergo. The path ahead seemed unclear, and the doubts began to creep back in. How could he, someone who had built his entire identity around strength and dominance, embrace such a transformation? Was it even possible? Could he let go of everything that had defined him? His hand instinctively reached for the hilt of his weapon. But as his fingers brushed the cold metal, a wave of realization washed over him. His weapon had been his constant companion, the symbol of his power, his unrelenting pursuit of victory. But now, in this moment of uncertainty, it felt foreign, in his grip, an extension of the very thing he needed to release. The champion slowly withdrew his hand from the weapon, allowing it to rest at his side. It was as if a piece of him, the piece that had long defined him as the greatest warrior, had begun to unravel. The very concept of battle, of fighting for dominance, was no longer enough. Something deeper had taken root within him, a new understanding that challenged everything he thought he knew. The figure had spoken of balance, of wisdom, of letting go. But how could he let go of the one thing that had always been his strength? He closed his eyes, recalling the face of the human, the one who had transcended the limits of flesh. They had no weapon, no physical strength to rely on, yet they had evaded him in a way no one ever had. It was just their ability to dodge his strike, it was their ability to break free from the very concept of battle. The champion opened his eyes and looked around the chamber once more. The stone walls, the ancient symbols, the altar, they were all remnants of a long-gone time. A time when warriors fought for supremacy and power. But now, they seemed like artifacts of a bygone age. Relics of a mindset that was no longer relevant to the world he found himself in. He turned away from the altar and walked toward the exit of the chamber, each step heavy with the weight of his thoughts. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he could no longer continue the way he had. If he wanted to truly understand the universe, if he wanted to become something greater than just a warrior, he would have to change. He would have to leave behind the weapons of war and embrace the wisdom of the ages. The journey ahead would not be easy. He would face opposition not just from the world around him, but from within himself. His pride, his ego, and his desire to prove himself would all be obstacles he would have to overcome. But for the first time in his life, the champion understood that this was the true test. Not of physical strength, but of inner strength. As he stepped out of the chamber and into the desolate world beyond, He felt the first stirrings of something new, something more profound than any victory he had ever experienced. It was the beginning of a transformation that would take him far beyond the limits of the battlefield. And for the first time, he welcomed the unknown, ready to face whatever came next, with an open mind and a willing heart. The champion stepped out into the cold, desolate landscape, the harsh winds biting at his skin. The planet's gray skies seemed to mirror his inner turmoil. The world around him was barren, devoid of life, much like the feeling that lingered in his chest. He had spent his entire existence fighting for power, seeking victory after victory, and now he stood here, facing a truth that felt more alien than any enemy he had ever fought. The universe had shifted beneath his feet, and he had no choice but to move forward. His journey now felt like it had no clear direction. For the first time in his life, the champion didn't know where he was going. He had always been certain of his purpose to be the strongest, to conquer all who stood before him. But now that certainty had dissolved, leaving only the void of uncertainty. The champion's thoughts wandered to the human he had sought to defeat, the one who had vanished, leaving only a trail of unanswered questions. What had happened to them? How had they transcended the limitations of their body and become something greater? Was it possible for him to follow the same path, to shed the weight of his past, and become something beyond the champion of combat? The more he pondered these questions, the more he realized that the answers weren't something he could force. The champion had always believed in control, that if he trained harder, fought longer, and defeated more opponents, he would be able to shape the world to his will. No. But now, he understood that true mastery was not about control. It was about letting go. Letting go of the need for validation, letting go of the belief that he had to prove himself, letting go of his past. As he walked through the desolate landscape, a figure emerged in the distance, moving toward him with a slow, deliberate pace. The champion's instincts kicked in, and he immediately assessed the new arrival. Was it a new enemy? Or perhaps another challenger? But as the figure came closer, the champion saw that it was not a warrior, nor any being he had encountered before. It was an elderly man, his back hunched with age, and his face weathered by time. His eyes, though, were sharp, full of life, and they seemed to glow with an inner wisdom. He wore a simple robe, and he carried no weapon. The champion had faced kings, generals, and warlords, but he had never met someone like this. The man radiated an aura of peace, something the champion had never felt before. The elderly man stopped before him, smiling gently. "You have come far, champion," he said, his voice calm and steady. "But you are lost, aren't you?" The champion's brow furrowed. "I'm not lost," he replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "I am merely trying to understand." The man nodded, as if he had expected this response. "Understanding is the first step," he said softly, "but it is not the only step. You are looking for something that cannot be found through force or through victory. You are looking for peace, and peace is not something that can be conquered. It is something that must be embraced." The champion's eyes narrowed. "You speak of peace. I have never known peace, only know strength in battle. How can peace be embraced when all I have ever done is fight?" The elderly man's smile deepened. "That is the question you must answer for yourself. Strength is not wrong, but it must be balanced with wisdom. You cannot fight the universe and expect it to bend to your will. You must learn to coexist with it, to understand its rhythms and cycles. Only then will you find the peace you seek." The champion stood in silence, taking in the man's words. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of something within himself that wasn't anger, pride, or the thirst for victory. It was something gentler, something more profound and understanding that there was more to life than the battles he had fought. The elderly man continued, "I can teach you, if you are willing to listen. The path you are on is one of great change, and it will not be easy. But if you truly wish to understand, if you truly wish to evolve, you must let go of your past and embrace a new way of being." The champion felt a surge of resistance within himself. He had fought for everything he had, and he wasn't sure he was ready to give it all up. But something deep within him stirred, a feeling he couldn't ignore. Could this be the beginning of a new kind of strength? A strength that didn't rely on power or domination, but on understanding and balance. He took a deep breath, finally answering, "I am ready to learn. Teach me." The elderly man nodded, as though he had expected the champion's response. With a gentle wave of his hand, the landscape around them shifted. The barren planet, with its cold winds and desolate ruins, seemed to fade away, replaced by a lush, serene garden filled with vibrant colors. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers, and the sounds of birds chirping in the distance filled the space with an unusual sense of peace. The champion blinked, momentarily stunned by the sudden change. "This is the first lesson, champion," the man said, his voice calm but full of authority. "Peace is not something you can find outside yourself. It is within you. You must learn to quiet the storms inside your heart before you can understand the world around you." The champion looked around, confusion in his eyes. "How can I find peace within me? I have spent my entire life fighting. I don't know how to stop." The elderly man smiled gently, his eyes twinkling with a wisdom that seemed ancient and eternal. "The first step is to be still, to listen. In your battles, you've always been focused on the outcome, on the victory. But peace is found in the journey, not the destination. You must learn to embrace the present moment, to understand that you do not need to fight to exist." The champion's mind raced. He had spent so many years focusing on the fight, the struggle. He had defined himself by the battles he won and the enemies he defeated. Now he was being asked to let go of all of that, to find a new way of being. It felt impossible. But a part of him, a quiet voice deep inside, knew that this was the only way forward. "How do I stop fighting?" the champion asked, his voice barely a whisper. "By recognizing that the fight is not external," the elderly man replied. "You have been fighting for control, for dominance, for recognition. But true strength comes from understanding that you are not in control of everything. Life flows just like the wind or the river. The more you try to force it, the more you will resist its natural course. Only by surrendering to the flow of life can you find the peace you seek." The champion stood silently, taking in the man's words. It was a difficult concept to grasp, surrendering to life's flow rather than fighting it. He had spent so long fighting against everything and everyone, believing that the more he resisted, the more power he would gain. Yet the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the real battle was within himself. The elderly man extended his hand, motioning for the champion to join him. "Come," he said. "Let us walk together." The champion followed, and they walked through the garden, the sounds of nature surrounding them. As they walked, the man spoke of balance, of the importance of understanding both the light and dark aspects of oneself. "To find peace," the elderly man explained, "you must first make peace with your own contradictions. The warrior within you, the champion, is not wrong, but there must be a balance. You cannot allow your anger, your pride, your need for victory to control you. You must learn to see those emotions, acknowledge them, and then release them." The champion felt a strange sense of peace as they walked together, the man's words resonating in the very core of his being. For the first time, he felt like he was beginning to understand something beyond the battlefield, beyond the struggle for supremacy. There was a quiet strength in this acceptance, a power that didn't require fighting, a power that didn't rely on domination. As they reached the edge of the garden, the elderly man turned to face the champion. "You are ready, champion. The path ahead will not be easy, and there will be times when you will want to return to your old ways. But remember, true power comes from within. It comes from your ability to understand yourself, to embrace both your strength and your weakness, your victories and your defeats. The journey you are on is one of transformation, and only by embracing that transformation can you find the peace you seek." The champion nodded, a sense of clarity washing over him. He had spent so many years searching for victory, for recognition, for power. But now, he understood that the true victory was not in defeating others, but in overcoming himself. It was not about winning, but about finding peace. As the sun began to set over the garden, casting a golden glow over the land, the champion felt a sense of calm he had never known before. He was no longer the same warrior who had come to this planet, driven by pride and the thirst for victory. He was something new, something greater, ready to embrace the future and the journey that awaited him. The champion sat alone in the garden, his thoughts settling like dust after a storm. The journey he had embarked on was no longer just about the battles he had fought or the enemies he had conquered. It was about the quiet understanding that had slowly but surely taken root in his heart. He no longer craved the thrill of victory or the validation of those who had once feared him. Now, he sought something far deeper: understanding, peace, balance. As the last light of the day faded into twilight, the champion stood up, his legs feeling lighter than they ever had. The weight that had once burdened him, the weight of his past, his need for control, no longer felt so heavy. In its place was something far more powerful, a calm assurance that he was exactly where he needed to be. The elderly man who had guided him remained close, always observing with that serene smile. He had spoken little during the last few hours, allowing the champion's mind to do the hard work. The moments of silence had become as valuable as the lessons in speech. "You have made great progress," the elderly man finally spoke, his voice as steady as ever. "But the path of peace is never fully complete. It is a journey that stretches across lifetimes. You will find yourself tempted to return to your old ways, to seek out conflict or struggle. But remember, true strength lies in your ability to remain steadfast in your understanding." The champion nodded, his mind clearer than ever before. "I understand," he said, though the words felt different now. They weren't just a response to the teachings he had received, they were a reflection of his own internal shift. But what happens now? What is my place in this world if I'm no longer a warrior, no longer a champion? The elderly man's eyes twinkled with the knowledge of someone who had seen countless souls walk similar paths. "You are still a champion," he said softly. "But you must understand that your battle was never against other beings. Your true battle was always within yourself. You must now use your strength not to conquer, but to guide, to teach, to help others who are lost as you were. Your path is now one of wisdom, not force." The words hung in the air, slowly sinking into the champion's mind like seeds being planted in fertile soil. His entire identity had been defined by his ability to fight, to overcome. But now, he was being asked to overcome something else. Himself. He was being called to step beyond the confines of his past and become a beacon for those who still fought the same battles he had once fought. "But how can I teach others when I am still learning myself?" the champion asked, his voice filled with doubt. The elderly man chuckled softly. "That is the beauty of it. You will never stop learning. No one does. The true teacher is always a student. By embracing your own journey, you become the guide for others. You show them that change is possible, that peace is attainable, not through domination, but through understanding." The champion's heart swelled with emotion. He had been given a new purpose, one that transcended the glory of battle. It was a purpose rooted in wisdom, in helping others find the same peace he had discovered. He had once thought that power was the ultimate goal. But now he realized that power was not in the victory over others, it was in the victory over oneself. The garden seemed to come alive around him, the colors of the flowers deepening with the setting sun, and the sounds of nature growing richer as the night approached. The champion felt a sense of connection to the world that he had never known before. He wasn't separate from it, but a part of it, just as all living things were part of the great tapestry of life. The elderly man placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your journey is just beginning, champion. The world is full of those who seek what you now know. You will encounter many who are lost, many who are still fighting the same battles you once fought. But with your newfound strength, you can guide them toward the peace that you have found." The champion stood tall, a new sense of purpose filling him. He was no longer the warrior who sought dominance. He was a teacher, a guide, someone who would help others find their way in the same way he had been helped. His path was no longer one of endless conflict, but of endless growth. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, the champion knew that the true battle had never been about victory over others. It had always been about victory over the self, and now he was ready to face the world with a new strength built on understanding, humility, and peace. The night sky stretched endlessly above the champion, a canvas of stars that seemed to echo the vastness of the universe itself. As he stood in the garden now, more at peace with himself than ever, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. He had once believed that his path was one of endless combat, a journey marked by the conquests of countless enemies. But now, standing under the expanse of the cosmos, understood that true greatness wasn't found in defeating others, it was found in understanding the self. The elderly man had disappeared into the shadows of the garden, leaving the champion alone with his thoughts. But the peace that had settled within him, was not one of isolation. It was a connection to the world, to the living energy of the universe that pulsed through every leaf, every stone, every star. For the first time, he felt as though he was part of something much bigger than himself, a small thread in the intricate tapestry of life. As the champion looked up, a soft wind stirred the air, the gentle rustle of leaves filling the silence. The world felt alive with possibility, and the weight of his past battles seemed to fade into the distance. The power struggle, the thirst for recognition, it all seemed so trivial now. What had once driven him to fight had now been replaced with a desire to learn, to grow, and to share that wisdom with others. He turned and began to walk through the garden once more, this time without the burden of his past. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he didn't need to control it. He would take each step as it came, trusting that the journey would unfold exactly as it was meant to. The champion knew that he would face challenges ahead. There would always be those who sought power, who struggled against the same limitations he had once faced. But now, he had a deeper understanding. He knew that true strength was not about defeating others, but about lifting them, guiding them, toward the same peace he had found. He had learned to listen to the world around him, to understand the ebb and flow of life, and to find his place within it. As he walked, a sense of purpose filled him. He no longer needed to prove his worth through combat. His purpose was now to teach, to guide, and to help others find their way, just as he had found his. The struggles he had once seen as obstacles were now stepping stones on a journey of growth and transformation. The universe, he realized, was not a battleground. It was a place of harmony, where every being had a role to play. Every action had a purpose. He was no longer just a warrior. He was a part of the rhythm of life, a teacher, a guide, a mentor. His true strength lay in his ability to embrace this new path, to accept the lessons that life had to offer, and to share those lessons with others. As the night deepened and the stars above glimmered brightly, the champion made a vow to himself. He would no longer seek power for the sake of power. He would seek understanding, wisdom, and peace. The battles of the past had ended, and a new journey had begun, one that would be shaped not by force, but by the quiet strength of a heart at peace. And with that vow, the champion set out, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the greatest victory of all was the victory over himself. The days passed, and the champion's journey continued with each step toward a future he had once believed was beyond his reach. With each new place he visited, each person he encountered, the lessons of peace and understanding grew deeper within him. He had become a guide, a teacher, not through words alone, but through his actions, through the way he lived and breathed, the lessons he had learned in that desolate garden. His presence had a calming effect on those around him, drawing others in, offering them the same opportunity for transformation that he had been given. One morning, while traveling through a small village on the edge of the galaxy, the champion encountered a group of young warriors, strong, eager, and full of potential. Their faces were full of fire, ready to take on the universe with the same zeal he had once had. He could see their determination, their hunger for victory, and it stirred something within him, a flicker of his old self, the champion of strength and domination. At this time he was different. He approached them slowly, his presence enough to draw their attention. They stopped sparring and stood in awe as he walked toward them. These were warriors who lived for the fight, who believed that their strength was the measure of their worth. They had not yet realized what he had come to understand, that strength was not the end of the journey, but a small part of it. The champion spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You are strong, no doubt, but strength alone will not lead you to the greatness you seek. If you wish to truly understand what it means to be great, you must first understand the nature of your own heart." The young warriors exchanged confused glances. One of them, a tall and proud young man, stepped forward. "We don't need lessons in philosophy, old man," he said, his voice dripping with confidence. "We need to know how to fight, how to win." The champion nodded, acknowledging the young man's words. "I understand. But fighting without understanding is like a storm that rages without purpose. It might seem powerful, but it leaves nothing behind but destruction. True warriors do not fight to destroy. They fight to protect, to heal, and to bring balance." The young warrior scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "Protect? Balance? You're talking about things that have no place on the battlefield." The champion's expression softened. You are right to seek victory, but the greatest victory lies in knowing when not to fight. True strength comes from understanding when to use force and when to walk away. The battle within you is the greatest one you will ever face. Once you win that, every external challenge will seem small. The young warriors fell silent, the weight of his words beginning to sink in. For a moment, it seemed as though they might dismiss him as just another old man with outdated ideas. But then, one by one, they began to see the truth in his words. They had spent their lives training for battles that would prove their strength, but none of them had ever considered what it meant to have the strength to walk away. The champion knew that his time with them was limited. He could not change their hearts with one conversation, but he had planted a seed. And sometimes, that was all it took for a person to begin their own journey of transformation. As he turned to leave the village, he felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never known before. He had not fought a single battle. Yet he had won something far more valuable, the opportunity to guide others toward a greater understanding of themselves. His mission, it seemed, was not to conquer or to win. It was to help others see beyond the surface, to help them find peace within themselves and the world around them. The champion continued on his journey, knowing that his role was no longer to be the greatest fighter, but to be the greatest teacher. He had embraced his new purpose, and with it, he found a deeper sense of fulfillment than he had ever known on the battlefield. The battles would still come. Of course, there would always be those who sought conflict and domination. But now, the champion understood that the true battle was the one fought within. And for the first time, he felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The champion's journey took him through many more places, each more diverse and vibrant than the last. With each village, each city, and each encounter, he shared the lessons he had learned, slowly building a reputation not as a warrior, but as a guide, someone who had transcended the need for dominance and had embraced the true strength of peace. One afternoon, as he crossed a lush valley, he was greeted by a group of travelers, families, and merchants making their way to a distant town. They were tired from their long journey, their clothes worn, their faces weathered by the hardships of the road. The champion, now attuned to the needs of others, could sense their exhaustion, but also something deeper, quiet yearning for something more than just rest. As he approached, the leader of the group, a tall woman with strong arms and a weathered face, stepped forward. She regarded him with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "We've heard whispers of you, stranger. You're the one who no longer fights for glory but for peace. Tell me, is that true?" The champion nodded. "It is true. I once fought for victory, for the thrill of battle. But now, I fight only for understanding. Victory is fleeting, but wisdom endures." The woman's eyes softened, and she motioned for the group to gather around. "We've been on this journey for weeks, and the road has been harder than we imagined. Some of us have begun to lose hope. We've heard stories of your strength, of your battles, but I don't think we need more fighting. We need peace. We need something to help us find our way." The champion looked at them, recognizing the exhaustion, not only in their bodies, but in their spirits. They were weary of their struggles, longing for something more than the next destination. "The journey you seek is not one of distance," he said gently. "It is one of understanding. Every step you take is an opportunity to learn, to find the peace within yourself." The woman frowned slightly, clearly searching for meaning in his words. "But we're just ordinary people, stranger. What can we learn from someone like you? You've been a champion of battle. You've never fought on any battlefield." The champion smiled warmly, his eyes full of understanding. "You may not have fought on a battlefield, but you are all warriors. Every day you face challenges, hardships, and obstacles that require strength. But strength is not just about fighting. It's about persistence, resilience, and the ability to remain calm in the face of adversity. You are stronger than you think, and it is this inner strength that will carry you through." The woman seemed to consider his words, then nodded slowly, as though a new understanding was beginning to take root. "So what should we do now? We have come so far, but we are tired. How do we continue when the journey feels endless?" The champion looked at the horizon, where the road stretched ahead, disappearing into the distance. "Right. The journey may feel endless, but the key is to find joy in each step. You don't have to reach the end to be at peace. It's not about the destination. It's about how you walk the path." The woman looked down at her feet, then up at the others in the group. Slowly, one by one, they began to nod, the weight of the journey seeming to lighten ever so slightly. The champion continued, "Take moments to appreciate what you have, the people around you, the beauty of the world, the lessons in every hardship. Peace comes not from reaching the end, but from finding contentment in the journey itself." For a long moment, the group stood in quiet reflection. The champion could feel the shift in the air, the subtle change as the travelers began to understand that peace was indeed something to be sought in the future, but something to be experienced in the present. They didn't need to conquer the road or the challenges ahead. They needed to embrace them. The woman who had spoken first turned back to the champion, her face softer now, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you. I think we understand now. It's not about how fast we get to where we're going. It's about how we walk the path." The champion nodded, his heart swelling with quiet pride. He had given them more than just words. He had given them a new way to view their lives. He had shared his understanding, and in doing so had helped them unlock a deeper wisdom within themselves. As the travelers continued on their journey, the champion watched them with a sense of peace that he had never known before. This was his true calling, not to defeat others, but to help them find the strength within themselves. The battle he had fought was not one of flesh and blood, but one of understanding, of sharing the wisdom he had gained in helping others discover their own path to peace. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting its golden glow over the valley, the champion knew that this was only the beginning of a much greater journey, one that would stretch across the stars, touching the lives of those he encountered and helping them find their own inner strength. The champion's journey, though long and filled with moments of profound learning, it transformed him into a being far beyond the limits of his former self. He had once been a champion of combat, a figure of fear and respect on the battlefield, but now he was something more. He was a guide, a teacher, a beacon of peace in a universe that still sought conflict. As he traveled from one world to the next, he shared the wisdom that had changed his life, guiding those who were lost and helping them find their own way to inner peace. One day, while traveling through a war-torn planet, he encountered a group of rebels fighting against an oppressive regime. Their faces were hard, their eyes filled with anger, and their weapons were raised in defiance. It was a familiar sight one the champion had seen countless times before. These were warriors who sought victory through force, who believed that only through battle could they secure freedom and justice. The champion understood their rage, their desire for change. But he also understood the dangers of allowing anger and violence to dictate their path. He approached the group, his presence quiet but undeniable. The rebels halted their movements, their eyes narrowing as they sized him up. The leader, a tall woman with a scarred face, stepped forward. "What do you want, old man?" she demanded, her voice filled with distrust. "We have no time for your lessons. We are fighting for freedom. We don't need peace. We need victory." The champion looked at her, his eyes calm, unshaken by her hostility. "I understand your anger. I have felt it too," he said softly. "But the path you walk leads to more destruction, more suffering. You seek freedom, but you do not realize that true freedom comes from within, not from the weapons you wield." The woman scoffed, her hand tightening around her weapon. "You think we don't know that? We've been oppressed for too long. We will not stop fighting until we have our freedom. Peace doesn't change anything. Victory does." The champion's gaze softened. "Victory gained through violence is not true victory. It is a hollow, fleeting thing. When you fight with anger, you become consumed by it. Your enemies will fall. But you will lose something far more precious, your own humanity." The rebel leader hesitated, her expression flickering between defiance and uncertainty. "And what do you suggest we do? Just give up? Let them keep oppressing us?" The champion stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I don't ask you to give up. I ask you to change the way you fight. Your struggle is not against your enemies alone. It is against the darkness within yourselves, the need for revenge, the desire for power. True strength lies in the ability to fight without hatred, without violence. To stand firm for what you believe, but to do so with wisdom, with peace in your heart." The woman looked at him, her brow furrowing. She was torn between the anger that had fueled her rebellion and the strange calm that radiated from the champion. "Do you think we can just stop? That we can fight with peace and still win?" The champion nodded slowly. "Yes, but you must first win the battle within yourselves. Only then will you be able to see clearly, to fight with purpose, not out of anger or fear, but out of the desire to bring balance, to create a world where true freedom can exist for everyone. For a long moment, the woman remained silent, the weight of his words sinking in. The others around her stood still, watching, waiting for their leader's decision. The champion could see the internal struggle within her, the conflict between the desire for victory and the possibility of something deeper, something more lasting. Finally, she lowered her weapon, her voice quieter now. I don't know if I can just let go of the anger. It's all we've known. It's all we've had. The champion smiled gently. Letting go does not mean surrendering. It means choosing a different way, a better way. The path of peace is not easy, but it is the only path that leads to lasting change. The rebel leader nodded, her expression still uncertain, but something had shifted within her. The champion knew that change would not come overnight, but the seed had been planted. And sometimes, that was all that was needed. As he turned to leave, the champion looked back at the group. Your struggle is noble. But remember, true strength is not found in the battle itself, but in the heart of the warrior. Only by finding peace within will you be able to bring peace to the world around you. With those final words, the champion walked away, leaving the rebels to contemplate his message. He knew their journey would be difficult, but he also knew that the true victory lay not in defeating their enemies, but in overcoming their own darkness. And that, he realized, was the greatest battle of all. As the champion continued his travels, the lessons he had shared and the wisdom he had imparted spread far and wide. He'd become more than just a traveler. He'd become a symbol of change, a beacon for those who were ready to move beyond the old ways of violence and domination. It was a transformation not only in himself, but in the lives of others. The champion had always been someone who could see the potential in others. But now, he could see the potential for peace in a galaxy that had long been consumed by war and hatred. One day, while passing through a once thriving city now ravaged by conflict, he was approached by a familiar face. It was a former warrior he had met years earlier, one whose life had been defined by battle, just as his own had once been. The warrior's name was Veros, and he had been a fierce and proud fighter, a man who lived for the thrill of combat. But now, as the champion looked into his eyes, he saw something different. There was no anger, no thirst for bloodshed, just a deep, quiet understanding. Champion Veros greeted him, his voice soft but strong. I've been searching for you. I've learned a great deal from what you shared with me, and it's changed everything I thought I knew. The champion smiled, recognizing the familiar struggle in Veros's eyes. You've learned the most important lesson. The battle you fought for so long was never against others. It was always against yourself. Veros nodded. I used to think that victory meant proving my strength, that it meant conquering the enemy. But now, I see that the real strength lies in overcoming the urge to fight, to control. I see the truth in what you've taught us. Peace is not weakness. The champion placed a hand on Veros's shoulder. And now, you must teach others. Show them the path to peace, to understanding. Your strength has always been in your heart. Now it is time to use that strength to help others find theirs. Veros looked around at the ruined city, the aftermath of the battles that had torn it apart. It's hard, he said quietly. There are so many people who are still fighting, still trapped in the cycle of anger and revenge. How do I make them see the truth when they've only known war? The champion's gaze softened. You don't force the truth upon them. You guide them gently. Lead by example, and in time, they will see. Peace cannot be imposed. It must be embraced. And that journey begins within each individual, but it is not an easy path. It is one filled with challenges, doubts, and setbacks. Important thing is that you remain steadfast in your belief. Never stop showing them that there is another way. Veros nodded, understanding the weight of the task before him. I will do what I can. For the first time, I see that my purpose is not to destroy, but to build. Not to conquer, but to heal. The champion smiled, his heart swelling with pride. That is the true victory. The battles will always be there, but the fight for peace is the one worth winning. As they stood there in the quiet aftermath of the city's ruins, the champion knew that his journey was far from over. There would always be more souls to guide, more minds to change, and more hearts to heal. But the road ahead no longer felt like a burden. It was a path of light, a journey of hope and understanding, and he would walk it with strength, not the strength of a warrior, but the strength of a guide, a teacher, and a friend. As Veros departed to begin his own mission of peace, the champion continued his travels. Knowing that each step he took brought him closer to the ultimate truth, peace was not just an absence of war, but the presence of understanding, compassion, and wisdom. It was a journey that would never truly end, and that was the most beautiful part of it. The champion's travels continued as he shared his newfound wisdom with those he met, teaching them to embrace peace, balance, and the understanding that true strength lies not in battle, but in the ability to rise above it. He became a figure of hope to many, someone who had once been defined by war but had transcended it, becoming a living testament to the power of transformation. One day, while traveling through a dense forest on the outskirts of a sprawling city, he encountered a group of children gathered around a fire. Their faces were filled with curiosity, their eyes bright with innocence. Yet there was a weight in the air that told him something was wrong. He stepped closer, and the children looked up, startled by his sudden appearance. The leader of the group, a young girl no older than 10, rose to her feet and stepped toward him, her expression full of both wonder and hesitation. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with a sense of hope. The champion smiled gently, kneeling to her level. "I'm someone who has learned a lot through my travels," he said kindly, "and I'm here to share what I've learned with you." The children gathered closer, eager to hear his words. The champion took a deep breath, sensing the unease in their eyes. They were children, but their world was filled with a harshness he knew too well. He had seen the way the galaxy treated its young, how it often stole their innocence, forcing them to grow up too quickly. They had likely witnessed the violence and strife that had plagued their cities, their homes. It saddened him to see them burdened by the weight of a world they should never have to understand. "Do you know why people fight?" he asked, his voice filled with the wisdom he had gained over his long journey. The girl nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "Because they don't know how to stop." The champion's heart ached at her words. "That's true," he said, "but people fight because they forget that they don't have to. They forget that the greatest power in the universe is not in the weapon they hold, but in the peace they can create within themselves." The children sat in silence, absorbing his words, and the champion could see the seeds of change being planted in their hearts. The world they had inherited was one filled with conflict, with people who didn't know how to put down their weapons and extend their hands to one another. But it didn't have to stay that way. He looked up at the sky, the stars beginning to twinkle in the deepening night. "You don't have to be warriors in the traditional sense," he continued. "Your strength doesn't come from fighting. It comes from understanding, from choosing to walk the path of peace, even when the world around you tells you to do otherwise." The children watched him intently, their expressions now thoughtful, their hearts open to the possibility of a new way. "But how do we do that?" the girl asked, her voice filled with a genuine desire to learn. The champion smiled warmly, standing up and extending his hand to her. "You start by listening to the world around you, to your hearts, and to each other. You learn to understand the pain that others feel, and you help heal it. You choose to be kind when others are angry, and to be patient when others are impatient. And when the world tries to pull you into conflict, you remember that true strength is in choosing not to fight." The girl reached out and took his hand, her small fingers closing around his in a gesture of trust. The other children followed suit, each of them looking up at him with the same quiet hope that had been absent from their eyes when he first arrived. They didn't have the answers yet, but they were willing to learn, and that was the first step.
Wow.
"Remember this," the champion said as he stood back, looking at them all. "Your journey is just beginning. The world will try to teach you that fighting is the answer, but I promise you, the real answer is always peace. And when you learn to choose peace, you will find strength like you've never known before." As the night continued to unfold around them, Champion sat with the children by the fire, knowing that he had made a difference in their lives. They were the future, and if they could learn to live with peace in their hearts, they could change the world in ways that no battle ever could. And so, the champion's journey continued, not as a warrior, but as a teacher. The lessons of peace, balance, and understanding were his to share, and he would travel as long as it took to spread them to every corner of the galaxy. With each life he touched, with each heart he helped to transform, he knew that the true victory was not in conquering others, but in helping them find the peace that lay within themselves. The champion continued his travels, carrying the lessons of peace and wisdom wherever he went. Over time, his reputation spread far and wide, not as a conqueror or a warrior, but as a guide, a mentor, and a teacher who had transcended the boundaries of strength and combat. His name was no longer synonymous with dominance. It had become a symbol of hope and change for those who were ready to listen. One day, while passing through a city at the edge of a vast desert, the champion encountered a group of people gathered in the town square, their faces etched with worry and fatigue. The city was in the grip of a terrible drought, and the once thriving markets were now empty, the wells dry, and the people desperate for a solution. It was a scene he had seen before: people in conflict, struggling with forces they couldn't control, fighting to survive in a world that seemed to offer them nothing but hardship. The leader of the group, a woman with sunken eyes and a weary expression, approached him. "You are the one they speak of, the one who has traveled across the galaxy, spreading peace and understanding. Tell me," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow, "can you help us? Our city is dying, and we do not know how to stop it." The champion looked around, his heart aching at the sight of the suffering. It was clear that the drought had ravaged the land, and the people were on the brink of despair. But he also knew that the answer to their suffering was not just in the water they so desperately needed. It was in the way they saw their world, and the way they related to each other, and in the way they approached their problems. "I can help you," he said gently, "but it will not be through force. It will not be through finding a quick solution or giving you something that you think you need. What you need, more than anything, is a change in how you approach this challenge." The woman looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean? Our wells are dry, our crops are failing, we need water, we need food?" The champion nodded, understanding her frustration. "I know, but in your desperation you have forgotten something crucial. You have forgotten that the true strength of a community lies not in what it has, but in how it comes together. In times of hardship, it is not just resources that you need, it is unity, compassion, and the willingness to share and support one another." The woman's brow furrowed. The people around them murmured in confusion. "You want us to ... share? But we barely have enough to survive ourselves. How can we share when we have nothing?" The champion smiled softly, his eyes filled with compassion. "In times of scarcity, it is even more important to share. It is in these moments that you must look beyond your individual needs and think of the collective good. Share your knowledge, your skills, your strength, and your hope. By coming together, you will find solutions that you could not have seen alone." The woman hesitated. But the champion continued, speaking to the crowd. "You all have something to offer? One person may not have enough food, but together you can grow enough to feed the whole city. One person may not know how to dig a well, but together you can find a solution. The strength of a community is in its unity, in its willingness to support one another, even when resources are scarce." He paused for a moment, letting his words settle in. This is the essence of peace-finding harmony, even in times of hardship. If you come together and share what you have, no matter how small, you will create a ripple of change that can heal your city. You will not only survive this drought, you will emerge from it stronger, united, and more resilient. The woman looked at him, the first glimmer of hope flickering in her eyes. "But where do we begin?" The champion extended his hand to her. "You begin by believing in each other. Trust that, by working together, you can overcome anything. The journey will be long, and the challenges will be many, but together, you can find your way." With those words, the woman reached out and took his hand, her grip firm with newfound resolve. The people around her began to gather, their faces lighting up with a sense of purpose. Slowly, the champion stepped back, watching as they began to organize, to share their resources, to dig new wells, and to plant crops together. As he watched them work, the champion realized that this was the true victory, seeing people come together, not in conflict, but in cooperation. It wasn't about overcoming the drought by sheer force. It was about overcoming it by working together, by recognizing that no one was truly alone. With a final glance at the bustling city, the champion turned and continued his journey. His mission was far from over, but in his heart, he knew that every step he took, every person he helped, was a step toward a future where peace, understanding, and unity could heal the wounds of a broken world. The champion's travels brought him to more cities, villages, and remote settlements. He had learned that peace was not a single destination. It was a journey that required constant care, nurturing, and patience. Everywhere he went, he shared the wisdom he had gained, teaching others how to find strength through understanding, compassion, and unity. As he continued, he found that the more he gave of himself, the more he received both in knowledge and in the deep, abiding satisfaction that came from helping others transform their lives. One evening, after a long day of travel, the champion found himself at the edge of a small, tranquil lake. The setting sun cast a golden glow across the water, creating a serene and peaceful atmosphere. He sat by the shore, his eyes reflecting the calm of the lake, and for a moment, he allowed himself to simply be no longer a warrior, a teacher, but just a person, enjoying the quiet beauty of the world. As he sat, he heard footsteps approaching from behind. Turning, he saw a familiar figure, a young man who had crossed his path many years ago. It was Kalen, a former soldier he had met during his early travels. Kalen had been one of the first to understand the lessons the champion had shared, and now he was a leader in his own right, guiding others with the same peace and wisdom the champion had imparted. "Mind if I join you?" Kalen asked with a friendly smile on his face. Of course, the champion replied, gesturing for Kalen to sit beside him. They both stared out at the lake in silence for a moment, the calmness of the scene enveloping them. Kalen was the first to break the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about what you've taught me," he said. "When I first met you, I was lost, angry, confused, and full of resentment. I thought strength was about dominating others, proving my worth through victory. But you showed me that real strength isn't in the fight, it's in the peace that follows." The champion nodded, his gaze still fixed on the water. "And how have you applied that lesson?" Kalen smiled, his eyes filled with quiet pride. "I've been teaching others to live by the same principles you taught me. We've built a community based on cooperation, not competition. We support one another, help each other grow, and work together to overcome challenges. It hasn't been easy, but I see the change in the people around me. They're learning to choose peace, to let go of their anger and fear." The champion felt a swell of pride for Kalen. He had seen the young man grow, not only in strength, but in wisdom. Kalen had become a true leader, not through force, but through compassion and understanding. "There's still so much work to do," Kalen continued, his voice thoughtful. "There are so many people who are still stuck in the old ways, who believe that violence is the answer, that peace is a weakness. How do we convince them that there's a better way?" The champion turned to face him, his eyes filled with quiet assurance. "The path to peace is not about convincing others through force or argument. It is about showing them through your actions that peace is possible. You can't change someone's heart by forcing them to see things your way. You can only guide them by living your truth, by embodying the principles you believe in. When they see the strength in your peace, they will begin to see the possibilities in their own lives." Kalen nodded, taking in the champion's words. "It's not easy. People are set in their ways, and the world doesn't always make it easy to choose peace." "No," the champion agreed. "The world is full of conflict, of fear, and of division. But that doesn't mean we have to be a part of it. We must always be vigilant, always striving to walk the path of peace, even when it seems impossible. It's in those moments when the world pulls at you, the hardest, that peace becomes the most important choice you can make." Kalen looked out at the lake, his thoughts deepening. "I see now that peace is not a destination. It's a way of living. It's a constant practice." The champion smiled. "Exactly. It's a way of being, not just something you achieve. It's a journey that doesn't end, but with each step, you become more connected to the world around you." They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the stars beginning to twinkle in the clear night sky. The champion felt a deep sense of peace settle in his heart. This, he thought, was what he had been searching for all along, not victory, not dominance, but a quiet, unshakable peace that could weather any storm. Then Kalen stood, offering his hand to the champion. "Thank you for everything, for showing me the way." The champion took his hand, rising to his feet. "You've always had the strength within you, Kalen. I just helped you see it. Now, it's your turn to guide others." As they walked away from the lake, side by side, the champion knew that his journey was far from over. There would always be more to learn, more to teach, and more lives to touch. But he was no longer the same man who had first set out to prove his strength. He was a teacher, a guide, and above all, a seeker of peace. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all. The champion's path had been long and full of challenges, but as he continued his travels, he began to see the true fruits of his journey. What started as an internal transformation once sparked by his desire for power and victory had grown into something much greater. It was a journey not just for himself, but for the galaxy, for all the people he encountered along the way. He had become a living embodiment of peace, a figure who showed others that true strength was not in domination, but in compassion, understanding, and the courage to choose peace in the face of chaos. One evening, as he entered a small town nestled between lush hills, he was greeted by the sight of a community coming together. The town was preparing for a harvest festival, a celebration of their resilience after a long and difficult year. The streets were lined with colorful banners, and the sounds of laughter and music filled the air. People of all ages were working together, preparing food, setting up stalls, and decorating the town square. It was a scene of unity, a community that had learned to thrive, not despite its challenges, but because of them. The champion stood at the edge of the festival, watching the people work in harmony. He saw that they had found something that had eluded so many others, a shared sense of purpose. A deep understanding that the strength of their community lay in the bonds they had created with one another. There were no walls between them, no divisions. Everyone worked together, and together they flourished. As he walked through the town, he was approached by the mayor, a woman with kind eyes and a welcoming smile. "I've heard stories of you," she said, her voice filled with respect. "You are the one who has taught so many about the power of peace. I'm glad to see that your journey has brought you here." The champion nodded, his heart full of gratitude. "It's good to see a community that has found its strength in unity," he replied. "You've built something beautiful here." The mayor smiled. "It wasn't always like this. There was a time when we were divided, when we struggled to see eye to eye. But over time we learned the value of understanding each other, of coming together in times of need. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it." The champion could feel the warmth of the town, the way the people had embraced the lessons of peace and shared responsibility. "What is your secret?" he asked, genuinely curious. "How did you bring everyone together?" The mayor paused for a moment, reflecting. "It started with listening. We stopped trying to impose our will on each other, and instead, we listened. We listened to the fears, the hopes, and the dreams of our people. And when we listened, we realized that we all wanted the same thing, two peaceful, thriving community. From there, it was about working together, supporting one another, and always choosing understanding over conflict." The champion smiled, his heart swelling with pride for the mayor and her community. "You've done what many cannot. You've found peace, not by avoiding conflict, but by facing it with an open heart and mind." The mayor nodded, her eyes filled with wisdom. "We all have a role to play in creating peace. It's not just something you achieve, it's something you live. And by living it, you inspire others to do the same." As the night grew darker, the festival continued to unfold around them. The champion looked at the people dancing, laughing, and sharing stories, their faces filled with joy. This was what true victory looked like, a community that had learned to live in peace, to rise above the struggles of their past and embrace a future built on understanding and cooperation. The champion knew that his work was far from over. There were still many more who needed to hear his message, many more who needed to find their own path to peace. But as he stood there, watching the community thrive, he realized that the greatest gift he could give the world was not his strength, but his ability to help others find their own. He had once believed that the ultimate goal was to defeat others, to prove his power. But now he knew the truth. The ultimate goal was to help others find their own strength, to help them see that peace was not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding, compassion, and unity. And so, the champion's journey continued not as a warrior, but as a teacher, a guide, and a friend. He would walk this path for as long as it took, knowing that the true victory was not in what he had accomplished, but in the lives he had touched and the peace he had helped create.